The last few weeks and months have been tumultuous ones, and certainly historic ones, for the story of America's experiment in democracy. The impeachment of President Trump, now apparently concluded with an acquittal in the U.S. Senate, largely along party line votes, has thrown a spotlight on issues like the separation of government powers between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. There's been much discussion of what the Founding Fathers who wrote the U.S. Constitution, which came into effect in 1789, intended, and how the document should be interpreted to mean, as times and circumstances have ebbed and flowed. In addition to the foundation the Constitution provides, the structure of our government, where the individual states wield certain powers within their jurisdictions, and what the proper role of the federal authority is, has also been an ongoing subject of interpretation and reinterpretation. What are the rights and responsibilities of individual citizens? What does freedom and democracy require of us? Many people remember taking a class or two about civics back in school, where they learned about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the structure of the government, and so forth. In recent years, concerns have been expressed that this aspect has been somewhat de-emphasized, as schools struggle to fit in other requirements and responsibilities. So we traveled to 3 area secondary schools, Burton Academy, Long Trail School, and Arlington Memorial High School, to talk with teachers, administrators, and one student about how civics is taught and absorbed today. We started off at Burton and talked with teacher John Graff and assistant head of school Meg Kenny, along with Evelyn Seidner, a senior there.
So I think here at Burton we take an approach that involves kind of a macro view of what it means to be a member of society, and our mission and our core values really speak to the importance of responsibility, integrity, and service, understanding difference, perspective, acting in a way that enhances community and what's an individual's role to a community. And then I think our coursework supports that. And then there are lots of cultural elements at BBA that allow for students to understand civics at what you might have think in a traditional way, and then be able to take that and act upon it in the real world and make meaning for themselves and take action as a student. And I think this year we've added what we're calling BBA Spire skills that that are transferable everywhere, and to help prepare students for their life and learning beyond BBA. And one of our there are 4 Spire skills. One of them is citizenship, and we see the integration of understanding what it means to be a citizen across all academic discipline areas, and also in all our program areas: arts, athletics, leadership, service, etc.
So in thinking about a more traditional civics curriculum, where you would see that at Burton would be, especially starting in our sophomore year, where students would be taking a course that is a mix of civics and history, looking at the formation of the United States from the colonies, coming out of the American Revolution, the Constitutional Convention, kind of the classic civics, reading of the Constitution, looking at the separation of powers, federalism, checks and balances, and then from there, moving into a close look at the Supreme Court. We do a mock trial where students are looking at Supreme Court cases, and then the rest of that course is really looking at the expansion of democracy through American history. So looking at the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, as examples of how we expand those democratic ideals, how we begin to get closer to the ideals laid out, say in the Declaration, to the reality of what life looks like for American citizens. And students end the course looking at an area where they think we need to expand democracy, or to use their rights and privileges to get us closer to those ideals. Other sophomores could be taking AP Government, which would be a much more comprehensive look at American government and politics. And then following that up in their junior year, within the junior curriculum, students would be taking a class that really looks at 20th century American history, but through both a foreign policy and a domestic lens. And the overarching question of that course is really what's the proper role of government in terms of how it interacts with other countries, and also the role it plays in the lives of its citizens. And we're not proposing what that role is. What we're really pushing students to do is to come to their own conclusion as what they believe that proper role is. And one of the things they do at the end of the class is create this I believe statement as to what they see as the proper role of the government in the lives of its citizens in a particular area of interest for them.
So I got involved in the youth lobby at the beginning of my senior year, and I had known about it before, and my teacher, Miss Joyce, she's the one who recommended me go to a meeting because I've been really involved in the environmental club here at school for most of my 4 years of high school. And it kind of all started when I was a junior, and I went to testify at the State House in favor of the plastic bag ban. And so after that, I got more and more involved in more of the political process of environmentalism and climate change work. I went and I testified in front of the Senate Committee of Natural Resources, and I had prepared a statement, and I did that outside of school, but I had previously taken AP Government and Politics, U.S. Government and Politics. So I have a pretty good understanding of what our government is and our state government, and I've always been really interested in the political process and being an involved citizen.
We then went to Long Trail School, where we talked with the head of school, Seth Linfield, and social studies teacher, Tim Smith.
I teach it to my 9th grade U.S. history class in this way. We have an entire unit devout to civics, the way the U.S. government is structured, your role in the U.S. government. We continue that throughout the year with current events. I like to compare and contrast the policies and judgments of previous administrations, eras of history with today. And that is it's a difficult thing to do because we're in a 24-hour-a-day news cycle and everything is coming at you lightning quick. And how much of that is relevant, how much of that is bias, how much of that is overreach of the media possibly to get the news out as quickly as possible. And so we weigh those options quite often.
The ability to analyze an argument critically, the basic building blocks come through in Tim's classes and in our history and social studies classes, but that carries through the entire International Baccalaureate curriculum and everything we do at Long Trail School to be able to piece an argument, say what makes sense, what's bias, what's opinion, what's based on facts, what's based on emotion, and then that carries through to activities outside of the classroom as well.
Well, most of it is about perspective and context and keeping it that way. Obviously, when we talk about the First Amendment, freedom of the press, we had a pen and a paper and the printing press at that time. You didn't have television, you didn't have radio, you didn't have the internet and the mediums, social media that you have now that people use. The massive amount of opinions that are put into the Twitter sphere that people can jump onto. You look at that, that's just in terms of freedom of the press. If you looked at Second Amendment technology, it's amazing. The Founding Fathers did not have the foresight to think about automatic weapons and tanks and things that fly, and they had a one-shot musket that was used as a tool for the most part in the 1700s, not as a weapon, only as last resort. So it's to bring that context and understanding to the students and say the Constitution is a living document. It can change as technology and history change. That was the genius of the Founding Fathers. Do we now utilize that living document? It's very difficult to do so, but there's definitely an argument to be made. Can it be changed or altered to include the technology that has come into the 21st century?
Finally, we went over to Arlington Memorial High School, where we talked with social studies teacher Seth Woodman.
I'll teach 2 classes that technically have civics in it, right? Like I'll teach the 9th grade. So the 9th grade does more of a survey class of like social sciences. So they'll get experience with psychology and sociology and economics, but they'll also get a unit on civics, which I've yet to totally roll out. In past years, we actually just have a civics and government class, which I've taught as an elective as well. But the other thing we're doing right now here is that we have a dual enrollment course through CCV, which is a government and politics course, which is what I'm teaching now with that last period of the day. So dual enrollment with CCV, also an AP government class. So it kind of like overlaps, so the kids will be ready to take the AP test if they so choose. So in that class, the curriculum set out pretty straight, but you dive into pretty significant depths on a lot of different topics, whether that's the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the struggle between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. They read and have a pretty good understanding of the foundational documents. They have to know 3 of the Federalist Papers. They have to understand Brutus I, which is like one of the more significant anti-Fed papers. So that group of kids, in addition to that, will also have exposure to, I think, 15 different Supreme Court cases, ranging from Citizens United to Roe v. Wade to McCullough versus Maryland. So and again, they all have awesome questions, whether it's about the impeachment or about other really current events. And they do show a real interest in sort of wanting to understand. Now, that's not every kid. Let's be honest here. That's never going to be every kid. That's not every. That's why America, in the United States, has just one of the lowest turnout rates in voting. It is a real issue that we face as a nation, starting from the top, with people just not taking voting day seriously. And it's not a national holiday, but we expect everybody to leave their 9 to 5 to go somehow vote in the 4-hour window that they're given. Never mind when you start looking at voter suppression laws and all of those things that are coming out. We're fighting an uphill battle, but I have kids today ask me, hey, can I register to vote if I'm going to be 18 when it comes time? So there's interest on current events, there's interest on the impeachment, there's interest on being civically engaged and civically minded. I think the kids do really care.
Understanding the structure of government and the principles of democracy, as well as the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and other foundations of the government, may be more important than ever in a time of political division and polarization, to say nothing of an election shaping up to be one of the most momentous in many people's memories. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.